Jaguar Land Rover is apparently recruiting for a new group strategy director. I know this because it popped up in my LinkedIn feed, and that's because being a strategy director is what I used to do. So in this video we're going to talk through what I think I'd do if JLR gave me the gig. Which they won't, but I'm not going to let that get in the way of a video. So, strategy director mode, engage. There's a lot more to strategy than talking about the product range, but this is a car channel and not a business channel, so we mostly will be talking about the cars. But a good strategy starts with the customers. There's lots of fancy business school language about strategy, but it really boils down to who are our customers, what do they need and want, and what capabilities do we have to go from a blank sheet of paper to parked on their drive with money in our shareholders' pockets. Strictly speaking, I'm not a Jaguar Land Rover customer myself. I've owned 2 old Jaguars and 2 old Land Rovers, and I've loved them all in spite of their many and various faults. I've never bought either brand new, although I have tried a couple of times and been thwarted by the dealer being a complete horse's arse. And while that was a few years ago, the distribution network is definitely something that would be high on my strategy director list of things to poke with a pointy stick if it hasn't already been properly sorted out. JLR talks a good fight in its corporate reporting about what it calls customer love, and people may well live and breathe that inside the organisation. But it doesn't disclose very much that's tangible about who its customers are now and will be in the future, so in this video we're going to skip all that step and just talk cars instead. But first, here's a bit of context as to why there's a problem. Like a lot of car makers, JLR has recently hit trouble. The good news is that at least it went into this difficult spell in pretty good financial shape. It recovered well from the post-COVID lull, and it was turning a nice profit of a couple of billion or so, until this year. It still has reasonably healthy gross margins, meaning it manages to sell cars for significantly more than they cost to make. And until the middle of this year, that was enough to cover all the overheads and new product development and all of those sort of costs and return a healthy profit. Even with the catalogue of unpleasantness that has been 2025, the revenue per vehicle, meaning the average value of the cars that they've sold, has actually gone up. Which suggests to me that multi-millionaires are still happily buying themselves new and better top-end Range Rover SVs. I'm sure we're all very glad that the multi-millionaires are still doing okay. What actually tends to sink businesses is not making losses as such, but problems with the balance sheet and the operating cash flows. And JLR's look pretty healthy by the usual metrics and ratios. So by not sailing into these choppy waters with any gaping holes in its hull, it stands a decent chance of weathering the storm. But the waters are very choppy, as we'll see in a moment, and that might not be much consolation to anyone who gets thrown overboard in a redundancy program along the way. So here's hoping there doesn't need to be too much of that. Here's where the profitability went. In the middle half of 2024, JLR made well over £1 billion in profit before tax, so well done them. If you compare that with the same period in 2025 though, it's all gone a bit too litre ingenium. We'll talk more soon about where all the sales volume went, but the biggest hit came, of course, with a raft of new tariffs introduced on a series of whims by the champion of free markets and low taxes, imposed on goods from more or less everywhere, including the UK. Although not Russia, obviously. Separately, in September this year, a ransomware attack from a hacker consortium called Scattered Lapsus Hunters shut down JLR production entirely for over a month. The company estimates the direct cost of this at around £200 million, although it's worth adding that the impact on the whole extended just-in-time supply chain went a lot wider, with serious knock-on effects on suppliers and their workers as well. But to be honest, that's a whole other story that I'm not going to get into here. It does kind of go without saying that a pillar of JLR's new strategy should be shoring up the firewall, but I expect they've already thought of that. And that's not all. There's an eye-watering £220 million of warranty costs in there too. The financial reporting doesn't give us any breakdown of this. That's probably an unfortunate choice of word, but it's bigger than the cyber attack, and it doesn't even really rate a footnote. Every car maker has warranty claims and recalls, but that's an awful lot. A lot of the problems around keyless entry and Ingenium reliability have been addressed now, but there's a capability about making sure that this doesn't happen in future. And there's a reputational problem there to be addressed as well, because unreliable isn't premium. JLR proudly states in its corporate blurb that Range Rover is one of the global top 100 brands, according to the marketing gurus at Interbrand. And that's not just car brands, but any brand. What they don't mention is that it's at number 97 of the top 100, which is more or less where Land Rover used to be before that brand got kind of kicked upstairs to be a sort of umbrella sub-brand, if you can be an umbrella sub anything. This is all good news. The only unfortunate thing is that there are a lot of other car brands higher up the list, including, interestingly, the first homegrown Chinese car brand to make the global top 100, which is BYD at number 90. When I used to own an old Land Rover, everyone called it a Jeep. So the good news for JLR is that the Jeep brand doesn't make the list. In fact, the only Stellantis brand that does is Ferrari. There's no sign of Peugeot or Citroën, Fiat, Maserati, Opel, Vauxhall, Chrysler, Dodge or any of the others. It's also very interesting that Ford has fallen completely out of the top 100 for some reason in the last year. Most of JLR's key competitors are up there though. If you look beyond the top 100 rankings and into Interbrand's assessment of the financial value of the brands though, you see an interesting and slightly more nuanced picture. Land Rover and Range Rover have held pretty steady in value terms, albeit kind of down there at a lower level, while several competitors have seen significant declines in the last couple of years, in spite of having high rankings. That Tesla arc in particular tells a very interesting story, perhaps one for another time, but suffice it to say that an $18 billion fall in brand value since 2022 would buy you an awful lot of bumper stickers saying, "I bought this before Elon went crazy." The range and particularly the hierarchy of Land Rover brands seems a little bit complicated given the size of the business, but I will grant you that the fad for micro niches means that many manufacturers do this a lot worse. Volkswagen, for example, is all over the place, with not just the Polo, Golf and Passat that we've known and loved for years, and the ID 3, 4, 5 and 7 that we know but don't particularly love, but also a T-Roc, T-Cross, Tiguan, Touran, Tayron, Touareg and Taygo. There's also a range of black editions, which are white, obviously. The poor old Golf appears to have gone off for a quiet lie down somewhere, like Grandad on Christmas afternoon, as well it might. Volkswagen has the look of a firm that could do with a new strategy director, but I don't think I much fancy that job. A man's got to know his limitations. So anyway, back to Land Rover. By the usual industry standard of a 7 to 8 year model cycle, which is quite generous these days, much of its range is due for replacement quite soon. Although in fairness, cars like the Velar and the Evoque have aged uncommonly well and do still look fresh and handsome. I suppose the full-size 7-seater Discovery still looks modern too, with its Range Rover family nose, but to me it looks rather ungainly and reminds me a bit too much of a Zaha Hadid municipal library on wheels, which is something of a pity after its very handsome predecessors, but I guess it's all in the eye of the beholder. In any case, the wrinkliest prune in this basket of plums is the Discovery Sport, which had a pretty major revamp in 2019, but honestly you'd never know, because it still just looks like the 2014 original. And 2014 is a long time ago now. The Disco Sport ought really to be a big seller, judging by the number of Audi Q5s and BMW X3s in every Waitrose car park, but JLR's figures show that it really isn't. There is a new mid-sized model in the pipeline though. And there's an interesting and rather surprising irony there that I'll come on to in a moment. Like pretty much all European car makers, JLR has to operate in China via a 50-50 joint venture with a local partner. And it's this JV that is developing a new Freelander to launch in 2026. These shots of a disguised prototype show that it'll be very much the same size and approximate shape as the Discovery Sport, so although it'll only be sold in China at first, at least, there does seem to be an expectation that it'll go global later on, at which point, presumably, it'll replace the venerable Disco Sport. JLR's Chinese joint venture is with Chery, which is providing the hybrid and EV platform and motor technology for this new Freelander. And there's that irony that I was talking about, because Chery is the parent of the Jaecoo brand, whose main product is this, the Jaecoo 7, which is a particularly shameless Range Rover knockoff. They also do a Jaecoo 5, which is a Temu Range Rover Evoque. The Jaecoo 7 is now a regular in the UK's top 10 best-selling cars. So you might think for JLR it's a case of if you can't beat them, join them, but the JV predates the Jaecoo 7 by several years, so actually it's more a case of Chery deciding that even if you've already joined them, just go ahead and beat them anyway. Clearly this kind of platform sharing with someone is the way forward though, even if it may not sit very happily with a brand that historically prided itself on every model in the range being able to tow a horse box from Tangier to Cape Town in a straight line with no more extras on board than a Holland and Holland rifle and a packet of Fortnum sandwiches. Competing in car making is all about scale, even for premium brands like Range Rover and Jaguar, because the upfront costs of designing a car and setting up production are so high. So if I were the strategy director, I wouldn't stop the platform sharing game with the Freelander. Here's an idea. My proposal would be to partner with a larger scale manufacturer to build a small EV Land Rover on someone else's platform. Ford, a company that recently learned the hard way how not to do product strategy, announced this week that it would build a Fiesta successor and a small crossover, like it doesn't have enough of those, on Renault's AMPR platform that underpins its new 4 and 5 electric cars. Ford's slow-selling Explorer and Capri SUVs are already based on a Volkswagen platform. It's the same one as the Taproom and Toy Gun, or whatever they're called. And there's no reason JLR shouldn't play the platform borrowing game as well. It's worth bearing in mind too that as well as the Chery Freelander thing, the V8 engine top-line versions of the Range Rover already use BMW engines, so JLR has well and truly popped the cork on the component sharing bottle. There is a risk though with starting with Chery's platform. At present, the lease cost of an Evoque is about 2.5 times that of a Jaecoo 7, which is roughly the same size and quite blatantly the same look. Sure, the Evoque is a better car, but on the other hand, you can have a spare Jaecoo 7 and a spa break every year for the same money. And the problem is that premium gets a lot harder to justify when the underpinnings of the car are exactly the same. But assuming Ford's deal with Renault isn't exclusive, it's not a stretch to imagine that Renault 4 Electric reshaped as a fairly basic and reasonably priced, but slightly premium feeling Land Rover with Tonka toy styling, like a kind of Skoda Yeti for the 2030s, but using some Land Rover Series 3 heritage design cues, like this. And if it turns out not to be the Renault AMPR platform, then maybe it could be VW's new MEB Plus platform for small EVs, like the forthcoming ID Cross that was revealed just yesterday. I just threw this rendering together in a day or so, but if someone skilled designed it properly, I can imagine it selling like hot buns to Chelsea mums. Or Chelsea buns to hot mums, whatever. Either way, it seems to me like a smart move. They could even badge it the County, which is a perfectly fine sub-brand that JLR already owns as far as I know. Just need to make sure that letter O is really firmly glued on. Here's Jaguar's range of current products. That's right, there aren't any. There is this, of course, the Concept 00 from 2024. Is it really a year old already? Anyway, it's interesting. And I guess that was the idea, of course, so to get people talking about the brand while it's sequestered away in rehab somewhere. Being a concept, there'll no doubt be some fairly significant changes by the time anything remotely like it reaches production. It's bluff and brutalist, where Jaguars have always been sinuously sleek, but it does have some definite echoes of the XJS in the overall proportions. As someone who owns an XJS, this one, you'll get no complaints from me if those ratios get carried through to production. Jaguar had previously talked about the relaunch car being a four-door saloon. But whatever shape it is, the trick is going to be channeling that brand heritage without producing a retro pastiche. They got this kind of wrong in the Ford ownership era with the S-Type, X-Type and X350XJ, the last of which in particular was a pretty decent car, but it just looked old and dated quickly. Whatever you think of the specific Concept 00 design, at least it seems more like a return to William Lyons' forward-looking ethos that made Jaguar great in the first place. It never started out as a retro thing. Whatever it looks like, my strong view would be to use Land Rover for SUVs and Jaguar for saloons, GTs and sports cars. Jaguar's DNA is as a clever maker of desirable performance saloons and grand touring / sports cars that appeal to smart buyers because they drive and look at least as well as other prestige brands, but often for a little bit less money. When JLR already has the world's most valuable 4x4 brand by far, it makes no strategic sense to me for Jaguar to be making SUVs. Now, you might argue that nobody wants performance saloons and GTs anymore, and I do hear you, but I'd point you to Porsche's latest results, which show that fully 40% of its global volume last year was in its low-to-the-ground range, all of which you might reasonably expect Jaguar to have in its sights model for model as competition. We can't have a discussion about the future of cars without talking about the shift from internal combustion to electric power. For JLR, the product mix is mostly mild hybrids with a steady decline in pure ICE cars and fairly flat sales of plug-in hybrids and pure battery EVs, not helped by the Jaguar I-Pace going off sale. The I-Pace was kind of a pioneer of electric cars, but a lack of development meant that it became less and less competitive, and that's something that needs addressing. This is roughly in line with the global market, with mild hybrids on the rise, pure ICE declining, and the growth of plug-in EVs having levelled off, driven by cost and infrastructure challenges and a resulting shift in regulation timescales. That's all fine, although JLR's stated strategy of making the reimagined Jaguar brand pure electric only, though, looks like it might be a model cycle too soon. The mild hybrid still has a way to go. The new group strategy director at JLR, whoever he or she is, won't be the only new member of the management team. Adrian Mardell, who's been the CEO for the largely successful last 3 years, has just retired and been replaced by PB Balaji, who was previously the Group Chief Financial Officer of JLR's Indian parent, Tata Motors. He started out at Unilever and has always been a finance guy, really, as was Adrian Mardell. There are a number of dyed-in-the-wool car people on the executive team, so having someone in charge with a financial background probably isn't a bad thing these days. The other high-profile departure, or possibly non-departure, is Jerry McGovern, the head of design. Sorry, that's Professor Jerry McGovern, OBE, the Chief Creative Officer. Last week, he was reported to have been fired and escorted from the building. This week, JLR is saying that he wasn't sacked at all, and may even still be there, but they either don't know or won't say. This is all very odd, and at the same time, it's all very Jerry McGovern. It's a big pair of hand-tooled shoes to fill, though. He's created or overseen some very handsome Range Rover designs, as did Ian Callum before him at Jaguar. Incidentally, Ian Callum has a CBE, which is one grade up from Professor McGovern's OBE. Wonder if that annoys him at all. Anyway, whoever's in charge of design at JLR for the next few years, he or she has a pretty big job to do, and a delicate path to tread between modernity and heritage, between distinctive versus ugly, BMW, I'm looking at you, and between feeling fresh as a newborn lamb and aging like a newborn mayfly. Making these cars desirable and aspirational, but at the same time starting at a level that brings enough volume to support the scale a modern car maker needs, is going to be absolutely vital to the future of the business. I really want Jaguar Land Rover to succeed again and to do as well as it has been until only recently. It's one of the UK's largest employers and is its largest maker of cars. And yes, I know its owners are in India, but this isn't a nationalistic thing. I'm just worried enough already about the direction of the UK's trade and employment and politics and society for that matter, without us losing Jaguar and Land Rover as well. So whoever gets the job, I hope they're good and lucky.